Ready.
All right, I'm going to get started. There may be a couple of people joining us late, but that's okay. So my name is Dave Andreas. I work here for REI in the camping department, and I also work for the REI Outdoor School here in Austin, teaching classes like this one in the stores, typically in the downtown store in here. And I also teach field classes in map and compass. We lead local hikes, and I'm also one of the leaders of some of the overnight backpacking trips that we've started to offer. So Austin is actually in the process of building their outdoor school into a more of a field experience. So if you haven't seen our field classes offered, you can find those out on our website. So I'll give you a little bit about my background. I started backpacking as a kid, as a Boy Scout in Pennsylvania. And I kind of got out of it for a while as I was going through college and having a family and starting a career and all those kinds of things. And then about 25 years ago, I started back up again. And I moved to Texas about 18 years ago. And since moving here, I've started to get all over the country backpacking. I go out for a week-long trip every summer, somewhere in the mountain states. I have a kind of a core group of friends that we go out and plan our own trips and go out there for a week usually, and then I kind of fill in with little short trips around Austin and things like that in the non-summer season. So I will be talking to some about the way I approach backpacking towards the later end of the course. The beginning is a presentation that's put together by REI, talks about some of the aspects. Actually, I'll go to this. So we go through some of the leave no trace aspects of basically doing anything in the outdoors these days. Talk a little bit about planning trips and things you need to be thinking about if you're going to go out into wilderness areas and be away from maybe emergency care and things like that. The 10 essentials is basically an outline of essential gear. And then from there, we'll go into some gear specifics. And then the case study is basically, I'll start pulling everything I carry out of my pack and let you see how I approach this. And then I've got some like additional resources towards the end, classes and things like that you can use to kind of further your education. So how many people have been backpacking before? Whoa, that's good. Okay, how many people have been camping? Slept overnight in a tent? Maybe driven into a campsite? Okay, so you're probably familiar with some of the gear that you use for camping, sleeping bags, sleeping pads, tents, things like that. You might have some pretty heavy, large gear because you're carrying it in the back of your car. You're not carrying it on your back, so we'll talk more about the specifics of backpacking related gear. Does anybody have like a plan for an upcoming hiking or backpacking kind of activity that they're planning for? Yes. What are you planning to do?
Peru.
Sorry?
Peru?
Oh, okay. Machu Picchu?
Yes.
Yeah. So you won't be carrying camping gear there, right?
Not a whole lot, no.
Yeah. Okay.
And then Guadalupe Peak
Guadalupe Peak?
next spring.
Cool. So one of the challenges Guadalupe Peak is like on the bowl, there's no water up there, right? So that's a factor that you're going to have to deal with.
Lake Georgetown.
Okay. Yeah, there's a really nice big long loop you can do around Lake Georgetown. Yes.
Camino de Santiago.
Okay. So that's another situation where you won't be carrying lots of camping gear, but you'll be hiking every day, carrying your personal things and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we won't be shipping it in. We'll be carrying it.
Okay.
We're planning the PCT.
Yeah? Full through hike? When are you planning to do that?
End of June, early July.
Next year? You're going to start at the end of June?
We're going
South,
southbound.
north to south? Okay. If you're going north, you're getting a late start.
Yeah, no. My
Alright.
contract for my job is up.
Cool.
So we that late, and I'm like, oh well, if we go south, yeah.
Yeah, that should be doable. All right. Feel free to ask questions throughout the class. Really want to, give you guys an opportunity to get from this what you want. It's a canned presentation. It may not be set up for specifically the kinds of things you're interested in. So don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm going to try really hard to finish 8 to 8:15, somewhere in there. I usually go over because I can talk a lot and I love to tell stories. But so we'll see how that all goes. Okay. So getting started. There is in the last 20 years, I'd say, there's a whole ethic that has evolved around going into the backcountry. It's called Leave No Trace. I'm going to get into the specifics of that on the next slide. But the first thing you want to do is any area you're going into, learn about the rules and regulations of that area. Not all areas are the same. I was in Idaho this past summer, the Sawtooth Wilderness, very pristine wilderness area, and they're really trying hard to keep it that way. So for the group, the size that we had, we were required to meet with a ranger and go through and leave no trace discussion with the ranger. So he could tell us some of the things that they require in their wilderness area. If you're going into areas with bears, sometimes they require you to watch a bear safety video. There are different fire rules depending on where you go, and depending on the time of year and the amount of moisture that they have in the system. So it's really important to understand the rules and regulations. Like the PCT, they require permits to get on the PCT. Some areas they have quotas for how many people can go out in an area at a time. So you want to know that before you get there, whether permits are required and quotas and things like that. The further you get away from civilization, the more you should know and be able to rely on yourself and other members of your party for your safety and things like that. So knowledge, certainly knowledge of camping, knowledge of your gear, but also knowledge of safety and first aid are really important. If you would sign in for me on the sign-in sheet, that would be great. Thanks. And then, once you get into this, share it with others, especially young people. Kids nowadays, man, you just read so much about how they're spending all the time indoors, sitting in front of screens. So the more you can get them out, introduce them to the outdoors, help make them good stewards of the outdoors. So let's talk about Leave No Trace. Basically, 7 principles to Leave No Trace. And these are guidelines. There's no, you must do this, you must do that kind of thing with Leave No Trace. But there are guidelines that they're trying to get you to follow. And a lot of it is just kind of using your own common sense. The first one, plan ahead and prepare. That's a lot of what I talked about knowing the area you're going to, knowing the requirements, regulations, permit requirements, and things like that. But it's also knowing what's the weather going to be like. If I'm going to, I flew into Boise, Idaho. In Boise, in July, it was 90 degrees. Tuesday, we were at about 9,000 feet and we had snow and sleet for 12 hours. So when you're planning, you need to plan for the weather at the elevation you're going to be in and things like that, right? So, and that ties in a lot to the gear you're going to need. So knowing about the weather, knowing about the wildlife, knowing about the regulations, and we'll get into a little bit of trip planning. We'll talk about some other aspects there. The second one, travel and camp on durable surfaces. Your primary durable surface is the trail. The damage has already been done on the trail, so stay on the trail as much as possible. Where you will see people commonly going off trail is in marshy, soggy areas at certain times of year. People don't want to get their feet wet and muddy, so they start trampling all of the nice green, fresh grass down, and the trail becomes like a freeway because it just becomes this muddy pit for, 25, 30 yards, or sometimes of people trying to get around the mess. So stay on the trail. Another area that is going to take a lot of impact if you're with a group is where you have your meals. People tend to congregate in a kitchen area. If you're staying in a campsite, even for 2 meals, that's a lot of trampling around in that area. So one thing you can do is find areas of like rock outcroppings where you're not going to do any damage to the rocks. Areas under like groves of pine trees that are just covered in pine needles and things like that, you're not going to harm that area. The thing about durable surfaces is you're trying to avoid trampling the vegetation and damaging the vegetation. When we had our little leave no trace discussion with the ranger in Idaho, he told us that the growing season in the Sawtooth Wilderness lasts 19 days. So everything that's there has had, it takes a lot to get things to grow there. And if you harm the vegetation, it takes that much longer for it to restore itself. So, that's a really important factor. Think about where you're going to set up your tent. Where are you going to be lying on the ground for, a whole night and putting your body weight on the vegetation and things like that. Disposing of waste properly, pretty much two key aspects there. One is, bring out anything you take in. Don't leave any trash behind. Don't burn things in the fire and think that they're gone because you burn them. Foil packets, aluminum foil, all those things, they'll kind of disintegrate, but they leave behind residue. The other part of handling waste properly is food and human wastes. So the rule on those things is 200 feet from any body of water. You should do your cleaning of your dishes and things like that away from streams, away from lakes. I see people who take their dirty dishes right down to the lake and they get their camp suds out and they spray it on there and they suds it all up. Well, those biodegradable soaps are biodegradable if you let them filter into the soil, let them filter through the sediment and things like that before they end up in a body of water. They're not harmless to aquatic life if you're dropping drops of them right into the lake, okay? Human waste, the same thing. You bury it 6 to 8 inches in the ground, 200 feet away from any body of water. Leave what you find, plant life, animal life, historical relics. In some places, anything that's older than 50 years is considered a historical relic, even if it's man-made. A rusted out tin can that's over 50 years old, in a lot of places, you are not supposed to carry that out of you. That's part of history, and you're supposed to leave it there. So don't just assume that historical relics are like Native American things and stuff like that. It could be, Western civilization artifacts that are over 50 years old. Minimize campfire impacts. So campfires are one of the biggest scars on the environment, basically. When you build a fire, aside from the fact that it leaves a big black scorch mark on the ground, the heat of the fire will sterilize the soil. I don't know how deep it is, but it basically kills anything that's living in that soil. For plants to grow, they need the microorganisms in that soil to be working in there. And so it takes a much longer time for anything to start to grow back in that sterilized soil. So if there are fire rings, use existing fire rings. If there are no fire rings, you can do things like carrying fire pans or fire blankets. Basically, you build a fire on top of soil, on top of a blanket, and by getting like 3 to 5 inches of soil in there, you provide an insulation from the heat. It doesn't leave a big scorch mark. When your fire's out, you can take all the ashes and that soil and just broadcast it around so you don't see it. And you can leave an area pretty much like there was no fire there. I've run into rangers in a couple different wilderness areas. They go around and basically remove fire rings, remove signs, they dig up the soil, they do all kinds of things to erase the fact that humans were there. So fire is a big one. And then obviously, don't burn fires in areas where there are fire bans. The impact of starting a fire outside of the fire ring is huge. So that's like a no-brainer. Respecting wildlife, pretty much don't harass wildlife intentionally, but also think about things like if there's a water source, most likely wildlife is going to be coming to that water source in the evenings to drink. You will probably see very narrow trails, game trails scattered around. Don't plop your tent in the middle of a game trail. Things as simple as that. Let the animals have access to their water sources and their food sources. And then obviously, don't be harassing them unless it's the bear who comes into your campsite and you got to chase him. So And then, lastly, be considerate of others. I mean, part of the whole thing is leaving the wilderness areas as they were for others who come out behind you, after you, but also think about other people that are out there at the same time you are. Don't put your tent in the middle of that beautiful scenic place where everybody wants to snap their photo of the beautiful lake, right? Also, don't go out there making lots of noise, things like that. I don't go out there to be around a lot of other people. I go out there for the solitude. When I was in Idaho, I was fly fishing along by this lake, and I heard a sound in a tree. So I looked up, and there's this branch swaying, and I thought there must have been a bird up there or something. So I keep looking up in the tree, and the next thing I know, I see a frisbee go flying by. So these three guys out there, basically playing wilderness frisbee golf, and they've got their little Bluetooth speakers strapped on, playing their tunes and everything. And I won't say that they were really annoying because they weren't. They were pretty cool guys. But you got to think about that kind of stuff. Like everybody's out there for their own experience, and be respectful of that. So, anybody have any questions about Leave No Trace? Yes.
The human waste, how deep does it have to be?
6 to 8 inches. I'll basically called a cat hole. You dig a hole 6 to 8 inches deep, cover it up. This little trowel actually has like that 6 inches to there. Right? It's a great idea to not leave toilet paper behind. If you go into areas that are really heavily used, there's a place called Chicago Basin in Colorado that's used as a base camp area for people who go and climb 14,000 foot peaks. So there are people camping there like all summer long, one group after another. And there are mountain goats that live in that area. And the mountain goats and a lot of other wildlife, they need salt in their diet. And urine has salt in it. So these mountain goats will actually follow you. If they see somebody walking off by themselves, they assume you're going off to go to the bathroom. They follow you. And they are aggressive. They push each other out of the way. And they are massive. And it's really kind of scary, but they will dig up the waste. Especially if you urinate in the same place. They will dig it up. So you go walking around and you see signs of where people have gone to the bathroom all over. And it's really disgusting. So if you can pack that stuff out with you, please, that's a better thing to do than leaving it behind, especially if you're in a really heavily used area. Any other questions about Leave No Trace? Yes?
What do you use for toilet paper?
Well, you can carry toilet paper. They come in little rolls, so you can do that. There are other methods. You can use natural elements, smooth rocks, smooth sticks. I don't carry toilet paper. I'm not going to go into details, but it involves a lot of hand washing. Careful hand washing when you're finished, okay? There's a book called Tips on Lightweight, Ultralight Backpacking out there that has a really good description of alternate ways of handling things. Like Western Europeans are like some of the only people in the world that use toilet paper on a regular basis. There are cultures all around the world who, even more developed cultures that don't use toilet paper. They have other methods. So, okay.
Great.
Any other questions? All right. So planning your trip. If you're going to go out on a little overnight here in the Austin area, you can go on like Texas Parks and Wildlife. All the state parks have little primitive cave areas that you can just hike into a mile, maybe 2, sometimes as much as 5. They're going to tell you all the regulations. Some of them, because those primitive campsites are very heavily used, are going to have outhouses and things like that for you. So in some cases, planning can be really simple. If you're going off into undeveloped wilderness areas, planning can be much more complex. So things to think about: who's going with you? What's their level of physical conditioning? How many miles can the group handle in a day? How much elevation change combined with miles can the group handle in a day? When I go, we always try to be able to camp close to sources of water, so we don't have to carry lots of water with us. But, lakes and streams aren't necessarily conveniently placed at 6 mile intervals or something, right? So you gotta hunt around, well, I don't wanna do 20 miles in a day to get to the next water source or whatever. So, planning your route around the things that you need, and what your group is capable of doing in a day. Has anybody been to the area before and have firsthand knowledge of the route? Does anybody have special skills? Training in first aid, training in navigation, those are all really good things to have if you don't have them, to have them within your group. So you don't get lost, you can respond to emergencies that might pop up, things like that. So where are you going? Trailhead, talked about permits. Are you going to do a out and back route where you retrace the same trail? Are you going to be able to find a loop, which is really cool because then you never have to cover the same terrain, but you end up back where you started? Another option is if you have enough people start at opposite ends and trade car keys in the middle, and you leave vehicles at either end, or you can do a shuttle where you drop a car at one end, hike through to that car, and then drivers go back and pick up the other vehicle. But those are all things you need to plan for. Even having ground transportation in a destination. Some places offer lots of shuttle services. Along the PCT in California, when you get down near Yosemite, you can take shuttle buses and all kinds of stuff from trailheads. So I know a guy that went out and did the John Muir Trail, which is like the southern part of the PCT, flew into Fresno, public transportation the whole way out to the trail, all the way back. Never had to rent a car or anything like that. So depending on where you're going, some of those things are options. And then also part of your route, it's really good to have an idea of some exit routes. One of the things about Google Maps nowadays, you can have Google Maps print out a route for you, and all you have is the context of that route. You have no idea what's 100 feet off that road, right? So, but looking at things within the scope of a map, you can see what are side trails. Maps like this of parks and wilderness areas can be really great for planning because they give you a large context of the area. Big Bend. And then on this guy, so it's got the whole park, and then on the other side it's got the Chisos Basin, so all the trails and everything. So you can see what are some of my exit routes if I ran into a problem and I had to evacuate somebody or get out more quickly. Guidebooks, there's lots of these guidebooks for various wilderness areas, national parks, things like that. They will also, lots of times when they describe hikes, they'll give you alternate routes. I was in Arkansas, 2000. We were out for 2 nights, and the first night it rained 8 inches. And we were doing a through deal. We had a car shuttle at the other end. The first night we were on the opposite side of this river from both of our trailheads, and we could not cross that river. Seriously, the river had come up 5 feet from the night before, and the water was moving so fast that we traced the trail back to both crossings, and there was no way to get across. So fortunately, we had a guidebook with us. We spent the second night in the same place, and the next day we found, through the guidebook, we found an alternate way out where we got to a place where the river basically got really, really wide in kind of a flat meadow area, and it was still hip-deep water, but it wasn't moving fast. So it was safe enough for us to get out. But without that guidebook, we never would have known that. And the places where we needed to cross the terrain was still too steep, and the water was still moving too swiftly on the second day after that storm for us to be able to take those routes out. So having some emergency options can be really valuable. What are you going to be doing? What's the environment going to be like? I mentioned weather, elevation, temperature is I think it's factor in a 5-degree drop for every 1,000 feet of elevation gain. If the skies are clear, if it's rainy and overcast, then it's 3-degree difference because the clouds become a blanket and help trap heat. But really, that's going to dictate a lot of your gear requirements right there. Also, think about like the time of year in the Rockies. Big insect season is like late June, early July. If you go late July, early August, you have much fewer insects. So think about that as well. And then, when are you going to be getting back? What are you going to do if you run into delays? Recommendation is an extra day's worth of food anytime you go out. And it's a great idea to leave a trip plan either with rangers, in some places they will require that, or with someone who's going to know that you didn't check in when you were supposed to, so that they contact rangers, they tell the rangers the route that you expected to take, and someone knows where to go looking for you, okay? The guy who, was in the Sly Canyon, got his arm pinned on the boulder, lost his arm, if he had told somebody what he was going to be doing, that could have meant the difference in saving his limb, because somebody would have been going to look for him, but he didn't do anything like that. So, 10 essentials. Anybody have any questions on the planning aspects of things? Like I said, if you're going to go to a state park or something like that, which is a great way to get started trying out backpacking, it's really pretty simple. Where it becomes much more involved is where you have to be out relying on yourself.
What's kind of a recommended mileage for somebody just kind of starting out?
It really depends on your physical conditioning. It also depends a lot on the terrain. My days are typically going to go somewhere between 6 to 10 miles, but that can include 1,000 feet of up and down, like in the Rockies going over passes and stuff like that. It depends on what you want to do when you get to camp too. If you want to burn yourself out on the trail and then like take a nap all afternoon, you can do that. If you want to have some energy for, taking a swim, I'm a fly fisherman, so part of the reason I'm out there is because I want to fly fish. So I'm not trying to burn myself out on a day of hiking. I want to have energy left for other things. But through hikers, when they get conditioned, it's nothing for them to do like 25 miles in a day. But they're up when the sun comes up, they hike, stop for breakfast, hike, lunch is on the move, stop for dinner, hike, and when it starts getting dark, they put their bed down someplace and they go to sleep, and then they do that the next day. So they're like maximizing hours on the trail to cover long distances. But I'd say most of the people that I've seen, like even beginner people, depending on how much, and also how much weight are you carrying? 6 miles isn't too bad. But like my average hiking pace, even with a pack on pretty rugged terrain, is about 2 miles an hour. But that's pretty fast. I mean, average walking speed just for a regular person is 3 miles an hour. So with a pack on terrain, 2 miles is pretty quick. But a lot of people will have to stop, take lots of breaks and things like that. So it just really depends. I would say so just start out light and work your way up until you get to know yourself. One good thing to do, like when I was backpacking less and I was less active, I would get my backpack out and start in like April. Start ramping up the weight in my pack, go on the greenbelt. The greenbelt is 7 miles end to end. You can do an out and back. You can do 6 miles on greenbelt easily. You can hit places on the greenbelt, like go out and do reps on the Hill of Life. It's like 300, maybe it's 500 feet of elevation gain there, something like that. So you can start to test yourself and see what your level of endurance and stuff is, and then do it when it's 100 degrees out, and then it's just like killer. So, but really training your body. I mean, carrying a backpack brings all kinds of different muscles to bear, and your feet especially. So, 10 essentials. So back in the 1930s, this group called the Mountaineers out in the Seattle area came up with the 10 essentials for going out like into wilderness, basically. And it could be a day hike, or it could be an overnight, or whatever. So they included things, they stated things in a more primitive way than what they're stated here. In 2003, they updated this so it was more relevant to existing gear. So first thing is, having some kind of way to navigate. First thing is a map. If you're on well-developed, well-maintained trails, you probably don't need a compass. Most of the wilderness areas that are well-maintained are going to have like signposts at major trail junctions and things like that. So as long as you can figure out from the map where you are and like, I need to turn right or I need to turn left or whatever, you can do a pretty good job. If you're going into areas where trails aren't well-maintained, then like having a compass and having some real like trail finding skills can be valuable. But that's kind of a more advanced thing. And then beyond that, there's really like off-trail travel. So having some way to navigate, sunscreen, yeah, back in the 1930s, they were talking about sun protection, and you can think about these guys like going up Rainier where they've got all this snow blindness to deal with and stuff like that. So, but today, sunscreen, good sunglasses can be really important. Clothing appropriate for the weather. Extra layers. People get caught all the time in life-threatening ways who go out for a day hike and something happens and they're out overnight and they didn't expect to be and they weren't prepared for it. Temperatures plummet when the sun goes down, storm blows through. The presidential range in New Hampshire, Mount Washington, is like notorious for drastic weather changes. It's got like the worst recorded weather in like America up there. I was in Colorado one time and there were these guys who did a day hike on Pikes Peak and then one guy ended up dying because storm came through and they weren't prepared for it. So yeah, if you're going out for a day hike here in Austin, it's probably not a big deal, but if you're going out into places where elevation is going to change drastically and things like that, it doesn't take much for you to get slowed down enough or an injury that keeps you out overnight and the situation can change drastically. Illumination, yeah. I like to talk about this stuff in terms of, okay, I've done my backpacking for the day. I set up my camp. I'm taking a few things with me and I'm going to go off exploring for a day hike. I'm out in the wilderness. What am I going to throw in my little day pack to take with me? And that's where like this stuff might really come in. Because let's say I'm on a little side hike. I'm just going to go out for about 3 miles away from my base camp. But something happens to me and I can't get back to my sleeping bag and my tent and all that kind of stuff. What do I have with me to help me through a night? So it's not a bad idea to just have your headlamp. Take it in your day pack with you. I always do. Take your first aid supplies, obviously. Know how to use them. Some kind of source of fire. Repair kit, pocket knife, Leatherman, multi-tool, something like that. Extra food, like I said, recommendation is to take a day's worth of extra food. I don't really plan extra food for an extra day. What I do is I'll throw a couple extra Cliff Bars in my pack so that at the end of the trip, if I got delayed, I've got something to keep me going. Food is not that big of an issue when it comes to survival. You can basically live for 3 weeks without food. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to be feeling real good. You might not have the energy after a few days to do a lot, but it's not going to be life-threatening. Water is much more life-threatening and exposure to elements. There's a rule of threes. You can live with it for 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 hours without proper protection from the elements. Hypothermia can kill you in less than 3 hours. And it doesn't have to be really, really cold. If you're wet and cold enough, it can start draining the heat from you. 3 minutes without air and 3 seconds without the right attitude. So keeping your wits about you in an emergency situation can be really important. Hydration, carrying water, having sources of water out there, having some way to treat water. It's really important. An emergency shelter, if you want to be prepared for one of those extreme things, buying one of these little emergency blankets that you can get for like $3, and they're like this big, and throwing it in your backpack. If you got stuck in a change in weather with really cold temperatures, that could be enough to make the difference when it comes to hypothermia, because it really helps reflect your body heat back to you. Other things that I like to add to this, signaling or some kind of communication. In a group, it's great. It's a great idea for everybody to have a whistle. If people get separated, I mean, when you're out there, you can go off to trying to find a place to go to the bathroom, and before you know it, you're turned around and you don't even know how to get back to your camp. Seriously, it's really easy to get disoriented. So, especially if you don't feel like you have a great sense of direction. So having a whistle, really, that sound will carry really far. So you can communicate with other people in your group. And then food storage, way to protect your food from small critters and large critters, really important. And that's another aspect of that, respecting wildlife, is don't let wildlife get to your food. Don't intentionally feed them, okay? That's huge. There's a saying, a fed bear is a dead bear. And it's because the more they get used to human food, the more they will become a nuisance to the point where somebody has to go out and solve that problem, okay? And then lastly, arm yourself with as much knowledge and common sense as you can. So be prepared, anticipate the things you might run into. Any questions on 10 essentials? All right. Next, we'll talk about clothing. Nowadays, outdoor clothing is all about layers. So you start out with a base layer, which is it's a insulating and wicking layer. The idea is to transport moisture away from your skin. When you're active, you're going to perspire. You're going to develop moisture in your clothing. You want to move that moisture away from your skin, because if it gets cold and you're damp, that's when you're going to start to feel those hypothermia kinds of risks and effects. So the first thing that you want to try to do is move that moisture away. It's also really good in footwear, because the moisture can start to make your socks a little bit more stiff. It'll soften up the skin on your feet, so abrasion, you get more blisters and things like that if your feet are wet typically, especially in harder, stiff footwear. So wicking the moisture away. Your middle layer is your insulating layer, and you're going to wear things like fleece, maybe down jackets, synthetic fill layers and things like that to build up as much insulation as you need, depending on the types of temperatures you anticipate. And then your top layer, or your outer layer, is your shell. So that's where you start getting into your waterproof or waterproof and breathable layers. So you don't want to trap all that moisture in, but you want to prevent moisture from getting in, right? So that's where you get into things like Gore-Tex and a whole bunch of other different brand names for waterproof yet breathable types of fabrics. So all that applies top and bottom. And then, think about like temperatures that you're going to experience. Hats, either for sun protection or a warm hat for cold nights. I sleep with a hat on to, prevent heat loss through here. And I wear a hat all day long to prevent the sun from, doing damage up there too. So a lightweight pair of gloves, depending on the temperature range, is something to consider. I didn't have gloves when we had the day of snow and sleet, and I kind of wish that I did, because I'm carrying hiking poles, and we're just hiking along through this, and my hands got pretty cold. But think about that kind of stuff. Any questions about clothing? Sorry, yeah.
What kind of pants do you usually use when you're up in the mountains with the changing temperatures?
So I'm going to show you like what I wear and what's in my pack. But basically, I can be pretty comfortable in like a light pair of nylon type of, pants, like the REI Sahara convertible pants.
Yeah.
I can stay, when I'm hiking and I'm exerting myself all day long, I start really cranking out the heat. My metabolism gets really kicked up. I actually lose weight after a trip. For the first week that I'm back, my metabolism is still jacked up, and I will lose weight each day after I'm back. My body's just burning calories. So that produces a lot of heat, but not everybody is like that. So I can get by with some pretty lightweight clothing, even at nighttime when it's getting down into the low 40s and 30s and stuff like that. I carry a pair of long underwear. bottles.
Okay,
I think I've used them like twice in like 15 years of carrying them now. One night it was because we had a bear come and visit, and I ended up staying up all night, and it got really cold, so I wasn't getting in the warmth of a sleeping bag. So I ended up putting all my layers on during my shifts to stay up and make sure this bear didn't come back. But so it's really, again, it's kind of a personal thing. Like, what do you need to stay warm? But I would say plan for worst case kind of scenarios if you want to be comfortable. But remember, once it gets dark, and that's when the temperature is going to drop typically, that's when you're in your sleeping bag, you're in your tent, you get all those nice cozy things to help keep you warm. Footwear, this slide refers to, these guys, these kind of lighter weight, maybe mesh kind of upper things as hiking boots. They're calling these like full leather upper, pretty heavy, stiff boots, backpacking boots. A lot of people backpack in these kinds of things these days. I actually backpack in trail running shoes, but I go really lightweight, so my pack is really light, and my ankles are really loose. So, before you start going in really lightweight stuff, I would do some backpacking with some more ankle protection. The keys to footwear are something that comes up high is going to give you ankle protection. If you roll your ankle while you're walking along, it's going to give you some support. The other thing is trails are really rocky. You've got extra weight on your back. If you have a soft sole, you are going to feel the tips of rocks like on your feet all day long, and your feet will ache at the end of the day. So having a good stiff sole can be really important. Good socks, especially if you're wearing stiffer boots where you might have more rubbing, a pair of sock liners can help reduce the friction against your skin. So the idea is with 2 layers of fabric, the friction happens between the 2 layers. The liner kind of rides with your feet and moves within the sock when there's movement to help prevent blisters. It's also a good wicking layer. It helps transport that perspiration away from your feet. Gaiters, typically, like if you're going out in snowy conditions or something like that, or if you like to hike in shorts but there's lots of brush in the area, like sometimes the trails can get pretty overgrown or get really narrow when there's a lot of growth, so you're going to be scraping against brush even when you're on the trail in places. So gaiters can help protect the lower part of your leg. They also help keep dirt and debris and things like that from getting down inside your boots. So I actually take gaiters because I wear low shoes. I have some gaiters that I'll show you that just kind of seal up around here to prevent like dirt and stuff from getting in my shoes. I also walk through creeks with these on. I don't carry any other like footwear, but that's something else in footwear. A lot of times, if you're gonna have stream crossings, people will take like Keens, Tevas, something like that, change their shoes, cross the stream, change back. Any questions about footwear? Yes?
Sock liner materials,
Sock liners, like polypropylene or Coolmax or something like that.
silk,
They're probably silk sock liners. I've never had them. I found Coolmax worked really well for me. I don't use them anymore, but when I was wearing heavier boots, I did, and they made a huge difference. I found, because I used to get lots of blisters. Or actually, I used to have a lot of foot problems, and then I started wearing a double layer like that, and the problems really started to settle down. Okay, shelter. So what are we trying to shelter ourselves from when we're outdoors?
bears.
Okay, I'll talk about that.
I remember your story from another class.
Okay. Sure, weather. Rain is like one of the most obvious ones. Wind, snow, insects, small animals, critters, yeah. So, you have a couple different options when it comes to shelters. Tents are certainly the most common form of shelter. because they pretty much address all of those things that you talked about, with the exception of bears. Anybody who believes that a thin layer of nylon is going to keep a bear out. But people get a lot of sense of security of being inside something. So, if you're getting started, a tent is probably the best way to go. It'll give you that feeling, and it will keep out like small animals and those kinds of things. But certainly, they all come with rain flies. I would recommend a tent with a rain fly that goes completely to the ground, around the outside, like this guy. Especially like Texas, you can get wind-driven rain that's coming in at an angle. So tents come in 3-season and 4-season varieties. Everything you're going to find in any of our stores here in Texas is going to be a 3-season tent. There will be different trade-offs in terms of how much screening and mesh it has. More screening, more breathable during the summer months. You can maybe open up doors and things like that, get some airflow. But for the kinds of weather we have here, a 3-season tent is going to be fine year-round. 4-season tents are like your snow squall, blizzard, I'm going to Everest and I'm going to be, at Camp 2 and all that kind of stuff, right? Those things are really designed and engineered to withstand really strong winds, heavy snow, and things like that. So if you're going to be in those kinds of conditions, think about a 4. But anything you do in Texas, a 3 would be fine.
So, we're looking for a 4 because we will be hiking in snow and camping in snow. Is that something that we should look out on?
You're going to be out there like with snow remaining or snow falling?
Well, there's snow remaining, but I would never not consider snow falling as an option.
Yeah, I mean,
My parents live in Oregon right now, and they said that they had 100-degree weather, and then the next day it was snowing.
Yeah, I would think, if you're talking about a light dusting of snow, no problem with a 3-season tent. If you're talking about having, 8 inches of snow fall overnight, now I would start to worry about the structure of the tent being able to withstand that. There was a guy in the store a couple of weeks ago, and he had a picture of a Kingdom 6. I don't know if you know what a Kingdom 6 looks like. It's it looks, like a barn almost. And I don't know where he was, but he got caught in a snowfall, and the tent was just like squished because it's not made. That tent's not made to withstand snow like that. So, I would try to kind of So you're going north to south starting in June. I
I
wouldn't
think thunderstorms would be a problem. You want something to
wind, yeah.
wind and thunderstorms.
But I wouldn't expect to get major snowstorms. I mean, you can get snow, but
Yeah. The
Probably
only
not
2
something.
people I've talked to who've done the PCT and not the AP ended up getting one bad day of snow
Yeah.
the entire trip.
yeah.
So I don't know. I'm worst case scenario, girl.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind spending extra just for the sake of.
we had a couple of, I think, 2-man 4-season tents in the store that somebody bought online and returned me like $800. So the price goes way up, and the weight's going to go way up too for something like that too. So I would really try to get an idea of what the likelihood of that kind of weather is going to be during the times that you're at more northern latitudes. Okay. I think it's not likely, but I haven't been there, so. Things to look for in a tent. Weight, obviously, ease of setup. Most tents nowadays are freestanding, which means you can stand it up without having it staked, which is easy when you're trying to get it pitched. You'd certainly want to stake it down to keep it from blowing away. If you have a 2-person tent, 2 doors is really a nice feature. So each person has their own access. They have their own little vestibule area. Couple of tents, I just brought some samples. This is an REI half dome 2-person tent. Sells for about $199, something like that. It's not the lightest thing in the world, but it's relatively inexpensive. You can pass that around. Nowadays, most of the people that I go with we're all there on our own. We're not there with a partner or anything. So everybody that I know has a single person tent. If you're going with 2 people, you'll actually have a lower weight solution, 2 people splitting the weight of 1 tent between them and sharing it. But yeah, two 1-person tents are still heavier than 1 2-person tent. Other options, tarps, keep the rain off. You have to be careful how you pitch it for wind and wind-driven rain. They're not going to keep insects out. So depending on where you're going and what time of year, you have to consider whether that's a good option or not. Hammocks are really popular these days. You can get a hammock, you can get a bug net with it, you can get a rain fly with it, you can kind of turn it into a tent suspended from trees. You have to have trees. But by the time you outfit the whole thing, you're going to be close in weight to a single person tent. So, and I can't sleep on my back in a hammock all night long. So that's another factor as well. Bivy sacks are basically like a waterproof sleeping bag that you put your sleeping bag into. So they're made out of Gore-Tex or some kind of waterproof, breathable fabric, but they can be claustrophobic. They don't breathe very well, so you can get a lot of moisture in there. So people use them for like certain situations where tents are not applicable, but I really wouldn't recommend one for typical use. Questions about tents or shelter? Okay. Next big system is your sleep system, your sleeping bag, and your sleeping pad. Okay. Sleeping bags, down and synthetic, are basically the 2 different materials. Down has the advantages of being lightest. If you just want to set all that stuff right over there on that side, or like right here by the easel would be great. Yeah, as it comes around the room, if you just load it right over there, that's good. Down is the lightest and most compact for a given temperature rating. It also tends to last longer. It's also going to cost more. Synthetics, less expensive. They will tend to lose their loft over time, especially depending on how you store it and handle it. If you keep a down bag, or if you keep a synthetic bag in a compression sack all the time, you're just going to ruin it. So always try to store your sleeping bag as loose as possible. I hang mine from a hook in a closet so that it's always like fully expanded and I don't have that fill getting all compressed. Historically, there were concerns with down in damp weather. The feathers would absorb moisture, they would lose their loft and clump together, and they would lose its insulating value. But nowadays, almost all the down bags are chemically treated to prevent that from happening. So that's something to look for. If you have treated down, the performance in damp conditions is as good as synthetic fill. What else? Synthetics, they're gonna be heavier, bulkier, but cost less. Thing to think about is what temperature range are you likely going to be using it for the most part. In the summertime in Texas, you practically don't need a sleeping bag. So people will do things like travel liners, bag liners and stuff like that. I have an old 20-degree bag that's not good at 20 degrees anymore, and that's what I use like in June. And I just sleep on top of it, and then I kind of partially pull it over me if I need it. You can also get bag liners and those kinds of things to add temperature range to your sleeping bag. If you're taking it, taking a 30-degree bag out into 15-degree weather, you can get a liner to try to get extra, warmth out of it. A couple notes on bags: they come in women's-specific bags, unisex or women's bags. Women's bags are shaped slightly differently. They also have more fill in them for a given temperature range because women typically sleep colder than men. Okay. If you look at a unisex bag, there's going to be 2 ratings on it. The comfort limit is the women's comfort limit. The lower limit is the men's. So if you look at a 20-degree bag, that's a unisex bag, that's the lower limit. That's a guy's comfort level. Woman, you can usually figure about 10 degrees, sleeping 10 degrees colder. So a 20-degree unisex bag is probably going to be about 30 degrees for keeping a woman comfortable. If you're in a women's bag, then you can look at the limits as they're spec'd on there. Okay? Questions on bags? Most bags for backpacking are gonna be mummy bags. The less air your body has to warm up, the better off you are, so you don't want extra space, especially down by your feet, because your feet are not the greatest source of heat. And also, you don't want to carry all that extra weight for fabric and material out in corners and things like that. So the other big part of your sleep system is your pad. When you put your body weight on a sleeping bag, you flatten out those fibers. It's the air that's trapped in the fibers that's really giving you the insulation. Once you flatten that out, you lose most of the insulating value of the bag beneath you. It's your pad that's your insulation between you and the ground. Okay? So, comfort as well as preventing heat loss is what the pads are all about. Pads come in a couple different styles these days. These closed cell foam pads, I started seeing my first closed cell foam pads when I was about, I'll say like mid-70s. Okay? I was a Boy Scout and we slept straight on the ground. And kids started carrying these things and we're like, what's the matter with you? You can't sleep on the ground? Well, I'll tell you what, the ground is cold. So, these guys, they're actually really light. They're bulky. They're not that comfortable. Comfort is pretty much proportional to thickness. So you get, maybe 3/4 of an inch of foam between you and the ground. And they'll do a moderate job of insulating you from the ground. So that's a closed cell foam. One of the advantages of those are they are like completely indestructible. I have one on the side of my pack. I bought it in 1990 and I still use it. Right? I can put it down any place. I sit on it by the fire at night. I hike really fast. I stop and wait for people to catch up to me. I'll unclip that from the side of my pack and I'll just lie down and like stare at the sky or do whatever. And that's why I use it, because I don't have to worry about it ever getting trashed. The next thing to come along from a historical perspective were these self-inflating pads. Anybody know why these are called self-inflating? Do you know?
Open that end and leave it and then come back.
Yeah, so there's what's called open cell foam in here. It means that the air goes in and out of the foam, where on that closed cell foam, you don't have air moving in and out. With these guys, when it's all compacted, you open up the valve and the foam expands and it draws air in. And it will actually, it'll fill this thing up over time. It won't be fully tight, but it'll do a reasonable job of kind of expanding on its own. And then you just give it some couple of puffs of air and tighten it up. And pretty good insulation. That foam is a good, reasonably good insulator. They're not that thick. That's maybe an inch and a quarter. So pretty good on insulation, not quite that great yet on comfort. For a long time, these were the Cadillac of sleeping pads. They can puncture. Pretty heavy duty fabric, but they can puncture. You should always carry a repair kit if you're carrying any kind of inflated pad. You'd be able to do a field repair, because once this thing punctures, there's no in there, you're done. Then so this is what that guy looks like rolled up. So it's small enough you can actually put it inside your pack. So I'll pass that around, you can get a sense of the weight. And
How hard is it to get it back to that size? Because I have one of those that's red, and I can't for the life of me get it back down.
yeah, what they've done over time is they started making the stuff sack bigger.
Yeah,
Because
my
they
stuff
realized
sack
that nobody
is
can
twice that
ever
size.
get their tents and their sleeping pads back into the original stuff sack, right? So they give you a little bit extra room. You just have to fold, and you just really have to start squeezing from one end and really try to get all of your out. The first time I saw one of these guys was 2011, I guess. So they are fairly new, but they have become really, really popular. Just air, no foam. You can get really good insulation from these, and that's why they didn't come out till like 2011. If you think of the old like pool floaty kind of air mattress or something, if you take that outside and sleep on it and it's cold, the air in there just gets cold and you will be cold. So it was the insulation part that they had to figure out how to solve. So now through materials, you can hear the crinkling in this. It has like baffles and layers that prevent convection, prevent the air from circulating around. There's reflective coatings that help keep heat from radiating away from you. They reflect it back. So these have gotten to be really popular because they are lightweight and really compact. And look how thick that is. You know, you got maybe 2.5 inches worth of thickness. So it's going to get you off the ground, away from the bumps and the rocks and things like that. So comfort, you can get really good R values, and it packs up into something that's small enough to go into this box. So because you don't have the foam, it packs up even more. So past that.
How durable is it? Is that one gonna?
Again, they're pretty tough, but any of these can get punctured. And a patch kit, is something you definitely want to have with you. So pads, I think that's it. Any questions on pads? The price range on these things is all over the place. The closed cell foam is the cheapest. The self-inflating and the air pads, they vary quite a bit, anywhere from like 60s even up to like 150, depending on the brand and R value and things like that. So one thing to look at, there's like selector guides out there when you're in the sleeping pad area. They give you weight, they give you pack size, they give you R value. The higher the R value, the better the insulation. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind depending on where you're going to be going. All right, we'll talk about a couple of aspects of your camp kitchen. I'm not going to get into a lot here, but two key things. Camp stove. Nowadays, pretty much everybody uses canister stoves. Two main types of camp stoves. The canister stoves that basically an isobutane canister, screw your little stove onto the top, open the valve, light it, boom, you got fire and you're cooking. They come in a couple different varieties. I actually have this one and I've used it for a long time. It's called a pocket rocket. I have a friend who has this one. This pocket rocket, when you collapse it, that's it. It comes with a little plastic carrying case because you got these little pointy things sticking out. I have a friend who has this one, and every time he uses it, I'm totally envious. Because this guy, when you collapse this, these fold in, they collapse like that. You can like put that inside your pot. You don't have to have a special case to carry it in and all that stuff. So and it's made out of titanium, so it's really lightweight and strong. So you can go, with a basic stove and then get titanium pot or something. This is an aluminum pot set. There are all kinds of options when it comes to pots. You can get sets that include cups and all that kind of stuff. Really the thing the backpacker needs is a cup, something to boil water in, and that thing that you boil water in can be shared among a group of people. So like one pot and stove for like 3 people is a good kind of ratio. A cup and a spoon, that's like it. You can get into more elaborate systems like the jet boil. This guy's engineered for really efficient heat transfer. So this bottom with all these heat transfer fins, the flame is coming right off here, really does a good job of getting most of the heat to go to the pot. They're optimized for boiling water. So hydrating freeze-dried meals, things like that. Don't open up a packet of noodles that you buy at the grocery store that says simmer for 10 minutes and put it in here. The heat transfer is so efficient, you'll just start scorching things on the bottom of the pot. So it's one of the downsides of these. They're very fuel efficient though. So it depends on how you like to cook, what you like to do. But really, I think for somebody starting out, something like this is relatively inexpensive. And get yourself a pot and boil water, buy some freeze-dried meals, and then start working your way out from there.
How many meals does the tank last for?
It depends. If you look at the packaging on any of the stoves, the stove is going to tell you like how long it will burn on a canister of fuel and how long it takes to boil like a cup of water. So with those two numbers, Your average freeze-dried meal is gonna be about 1.5 cups of water, and you can kind of figure out, what the fuel capacity is gonna be, and plan how much fuel you're gonna need to carry until you resupply stocks. Okay? So I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, but the specs on those are all available on the packages. And then you can pass these guys around. So you can feel the weight difference. This is actually a set that has 2 pots. I don't know why you need 2 pots personally, but. The alternative to canister stoves are liquid fuel stoves. That's shown on the bottom. If you're going to be in really high elevations, like over 14,000 feet or above, canister stove will perform better. If you're going to be in really, really cold situations, and I'm talking like sub 20 degrees probably, a liquid fuel stove will perform better there. So they used to be like the workhorse stove, but nowadays typically people are buying those either to use in extreme conditions or if you're traveling internationally. Some of the liquid fuel stoves can burn like white gas, kerosene, or unleaded fuel. So if you're going to parts of the world where you can't get access to white gas or these isobutane canisters, you can just go to a gas station, buy kerosene or unleaded gasoline, and you can burn it in your stove. So that's a factor to consider depending on where you might be going. The other thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to kitchen is water. How am I going to get water? So one of the most common ways of handling water, and you should always treat water somehow, even if you think that the water's clean. In the US, you have to be concerned about bacteria, protozoa, things like that. A filter is sufficient for pretty much any water source in the US. Basically, there's a porous membrane inside here. You put this in the water. It's got a little float, so you can try to keep your little acorn filter there off the bottom, out of the sediment. So suspend it in the water. You basically pump it. It comes with a couple different types of adapters, so you can hook it up like directly to Camelbacks, or put this in an Nalgene bottle or something like that, and you just start pumping. And what comes out the other end is really clean, clear. It's got activated charcoal in there, so it will remove some flavors, and it's safe to drink. It's good stuff. I used one of these for many years. I still have this exact filter, there's another version of this. This is called the Pro. I have the standard hiker. I bought it in 1990. The filter will start to clog. You just replace the filter, but the whole mechanism is so simple. There's like nothing to go wrong with it. I think I replaced the O-ring one time. Bought an O-ring at Home Depot and swapped it out. So great filter. Other options. So that's called filtration. Your other option is purification. In filtration, you're removing the bad stuff. In purification, you're killing the bad stuff and rendering it harmless, but you're not removing it. So a couple methods for doing that. One is ultraviolet light. Basically fill an Nalgene bottle with water, pop this guy in there, hit the button, in 90 seconds you can drink the water. The ultraviolet light will kill anything that's living in the water, including viruses. We don't have waterborne viruses in the US, but viruses are small enough that they will get through the pores of a filter. So if you're traveling in other parts of the world where waterborne viruses are concerned, you either need to filter and purify, or purify by itself, but you have to do something to handle those viruses. These come in a couple different varieties. Battery operated, protect the bulb, don't break it. I consider these more of a good option for people who are traveling and don't trust water sources in the countries they're going to, even in like hotels and things like that, right? It's like, don't drink the tap water. You can draw tap water with this thing, zap it, and drink it. It's gonna be good. Other methods, chemical tablets. If you're gonna go the chemical route, read the labels carefully. This one takes 15 minutes, and this one takes 4 hours, right? So don't think I'll carry a couple liters of water, I'll stop at the stream at lunchtime, I'll refill my bottles and treat them and have water for the afternoon and carry something like this. The downside of going purely with a purification solution is it doesn't remove anything from the water. It makes it safe to drink. If the water has a nasty taste because there's all kinds of algae in it, it's gonna have a nasty taste, and there's still gonna be lots of algae in it. And it's gonna be green, or it's gonna be murky, or it's gonna be brown, or whatever it is. A filter will help remove all of those things and give you like water like you're used to coming out of your tap. So it's just, if you don't know what your water sources are gonna be like, you know, you might not wanna go with purification, you might wanna take a filter. If you know you're gonna have good, clean water, but you just wanna make sure that if there's any bad stuff in there, you're gonna get rid of it, purification would be a good option. Okay? So I'll pass these guys around. This SteriPen actually comes with a little pre-filter. Basically, don't lose this ring inside while you're passing it around, but basically you screw this on the top of an Algene bottle, immerse the bottle in the water. It's got a little bit of a filter inside here, so it'll remove coarse sediment and things like that. The other thing about the ultraviolet light is it has to be able to penetrate through the water column. So if you have really brown, dark, murky water, it's going to impede the ability of this to do this thing, because the water can't actually, it's going to reflect off all those particles and it's not going to get out to the furthest extent of the bottle. And I'll pass some of these guys around too. All right. All
I
the
want to
time.
ask real quick.
Yeah.
Those life straws, is that just for not quite the volume of water as one of those pump filters like you showed?
You know, I don't understand the life straw, to be honest with you, because you're going to put the end of that in a source of water and you're going to suck the water through it to drink it. I need water to cook.
Yeah.
I need water to, do all kinds of things. So, I think of a life straw as like
Emergency.
a backup emergency thing, but not a backpacking solution, All yeah.
With filters and purifications and everything, if you're going on a trip and you have to carry like 3 to 5 gallons of water, can you bring a filter instead of carrying a bunch of water?
Yeah, so like I go out for a week, I only ever carry 2 liters of water with me at a time.
So then that's why you stop by rivers and lakes.
I plan the trip so that I will have access to water along the way. And in the Rockies, water is really plentiful, right? If you're going to Big Bend and you're doing the Outer Mountain Loop,
Yeah.
water is not really plentiful and it's a multi-day deal. So you're either going to carry it or like out there caching water. So putting water at accessible locations that you can get to the trail from trailheads and having it ready and waiting for you when you get there is what a lot of people do. But, going up to Guadalupe, up into the bowl in Guadalupe Mountains, there's no water up there. So general rule is a gallon of water per person per day. And then it just depends, like if you're in really hot weather, you're going to perspire more, so you need more. But the general guideline is a gallon per person per day. A gallon of water weighs about 9 pounds. 8.5 to 9 pounds, somewhere there. So it's a huge weight. All kinds of extra stuff that you can think about taking along: binoculars, cameras, pillows are popular these days, stuff sacks for storing your gear, trekking poles, obviously toiletries, toilet paper, toothbrush, toothpaste, all kinds of good stuff, right? We can put it all in. The old style backpack, external frame pack, actually worked really well, but they don't give you really good balance, especially if you get them really heavy because they sit off your body. Nowadays, you can find external frame packs like at REI.com, but you won't see any in any of the stores in Austin that I know of. Everybody goes with the internal frame packs. Basically, they're designed to really fit your body well. So really good balance. Really good, they kind of move with you really well. Keep the center of gravity in close. Fit is really key with one of these packs. When you're carrying a pack, you want most of the weight to be riding on your hips. So the fit is based on your torso dimensions, and you wanna keep the shoulder straps kind of snug over the shoulders so that it moves with you up here. I like to talk about it as like a comfortable but snug fit. So the pack kind of stays with you and moves with you for good balance, but the weight is going to be here. If the pack is too big, the shoulder straps are going to come up off your shoulders. It'll be sloppy up there and it'll slosh around. If it's too short, the hip belt's going to be up into your waist and it's not going to support the weight on your hips. So anytime you're looking at buying an internal frame pack, make sure somebody does a fit for you. Okay, that's like key. When you pack it, generally you want the heavier objects up high and close to your back. So you basically want to keep, you're going to kind of lean forward a little bit with a pack on. You want to try to keep that center of gravity like over the vertical plane of your legs and your hips, because that's where you want the weight supported. You don't want something that's going to be, if you put a lot of weight down here, it's going to be pulling you back. It's going to pull back on your shoulders and stuff. Any questions on packs? I'll show you a couple. So this is the Valtora that was in that diagram. This guy sells for like about $370. It's probably the most expensive, it is the most expensive pack we carry in the store. There's a lot of structure to this pack. This pack is designed to be able to carry pretty heavy loads. I think if you go on Gregory's website, they'll talk about this pack as being like 50, 55 pounds you can carry in this pack. It's got the structure to do it. Flip side, this guy is kind of same capacity. Doyer takes a different approach to designing their pack. This one actually has, like, I can remove the shoulder straps and the hip belt completely. So when you talk about fit, we pick a pack based on your torso. But let's say we have somebody who's really big but short torso. I can put a large hip belt on a small pack. I can put large shoulder straps because they got a deep barrel chest. I can put, long shoulder straps that reach around them on a short torso pack. That adds to the cost. Having all those parts mixing and matching and removable. Doyer takes the approach of one size fits all, lots of torso adjustability, but they don't have all the interchangeable parts. This pack's like $209. Most people that I try to fit in this pack, I can fit in. So this gets like 90% of the population, probably maybe 85. This guy's trying to get all 100%, but you're paying like $150 more for this guy. So I mentioned fit is key. Pack fit is like putting on a pair of shoes. Every pack is designed differently. Everybody's body is shaped differently. Try a couple of different ones on. Have them weighted down, carry them around, see what's most comfortable. You might find that you want to spend the money for this pack because that's what's going to be most comfortable. And I see people who do that. They're driven towards the lower cost ones. We try them out. They walk around with them. They can't get that comfort, and then they go to something that's got much more structure because that's going to be what's going to work for them. So,
You guys fit for backpacks here.
I'm sorry?
You guys fit for
Yeah.
backpacks here.
Yeah, we have sandbags and stuff, so we weight it down. It's really important to have weight in it. For when I look at how it fits you, I need to see that weight pulling it down. Because if you put it on empty, it wants to ride up onto your hips. The whole thing wants to push up when you start tightening things down.
The people that fit here are fantastic. We both got fitted for our packs and fell in love with our packs. And he gave us one of the moderately priced packs,
Yeah.
$259. Had us weigh it down, and then had us try on a $100 pack, $199, and weighed it down the same. And there's totally different. And they teach you what all this stuff is. It's great.
Any other questions about packs?
What about sizes? Just kind of, is there a general rule about?
If you're buying your first pack, I usually steer people towards the 60 to 75 liter range because, that's going to be able to take you through pretty much anything you're going to want to do. You can always underpack it. There's lots of compression straps and things like that on the sides to help squish it down if you underpack. People will come and say, hey, I'm going to do a 2-night trip to such and such, and I want a pack. And then I ask, do you ever think you might go out for a week if you get into backpacking? Yeah, maybe. So we could be looking at the 40 liter, something like that. I'd rather see you go out of here with a pack that's gonna like get you through years worth of backpacking with a variety of things than buy a pack for a specific activity and then be back here, in a year and go, hey, I really got into this and now I'm gonna go do this, but my pack's not big enough. That's just kind of my philosophy, but, like my pack over there, maybe it's a 50 liter, and it's not even packed full. But I go pretty minimal these days, so that's the segue into my most recent trip to the Sawtooths. Elevations at 8,000 to 10,000 feet, 6 nights, 7 days, food for that whole time, maximum 2 liters of water. Daytime temps expected were like 60 to 80 degrees, but we did have that one day of mixed snow and sleet for about 12 hours. Nighttime temps typically at elevations can expect near freezing. And then in the mountain states, like in the summertime, you expect like afternoon thunder showers just coming through randomly somewhere in the mountains, right? So maybe it's on you or maybe you're watching it off in the distance. So enough rainwear to protect or something like that.
How much water did you say?
I carry maximum 2 liters, but like I said, I know the route and I know that I will have access to water throughout the trip. Oh, you know what? I did pass these sleeping bags around. Sorry about that. Down bag, you can feel the weight of this. Also, this for some reason the stuff sacks on these bags are not really representative because this guy can compress a lot more than what it is, and this one is like really tight in that sack. So this is the down, this is the synthetic.
Are most of the packs fairly waterproof, or do they have like a
So
cover you can pull over?
the fabric is going to be somewhat water repellent. Zippers, seams, things like that. If you're out in really heavy rain, they will leak. A pack cover is a great way to go. It's just a continuous piece of waterproof fabric that will just shed all the water out.
Any of them come with it? Like I have a camera bag that
Actually,
has one that you can.
This guy, they are bundling a rain cover with this pack
Okay.
right now. They didn't last year on last year's model, but right now they do. So sometimes that's a little bit of a sweeten the deal
Yeah.
because they include those kinds of things. But you can always buy them separately.
Yeah, for the trash bag.
Yeah, trash bags, you poke your finger through those like by the third day. Really, they're not heavy enough. I'll show you what I use. So anyway, go through this. There's my pad. It's actually only 3/4 length, so it comes down to about my knees. By the time I go to bed, there's so little in my pack that I put my pack down under my feet and I just use that against my feet to the ground. I take one trekking pole, comes in handy for stream crossings and stuff, and it's also I carry a tarp, so this is part of my shelter now. Go through the outside pockets, water bottles. Let's see. I use a chemical water treatment. Two-part solution. You mix it together in the little cup, like 7 drops of each one. Drop it into a liter of water. You can drink it in like 15 minutes. This is Dr. Bronner's biodegradable soap. I mentioned I wash my hands a lot. This, just a couple of drops of this stuff gives you more lather than what you need. So, like, in a week you won't even notice that like this bottle's been touched practically. But that's really important. Compass. I carry the tiniest little knife. So I'm all about like weight these days. It's like a game for me to try to figure out how little weight I can carry. So everything keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller and lighter. So that's my little knife. But I can actually clean trout for preparing to eat with that blade.
How much does your pack weigh? All in all?
For this trip, including a satellite communicator and a camera and everything I'm going to show you, and 2 sets of fishing gear, 2 different fishing rods, reels, and flies and lures and stuff, 26 pounds. So that's getting down there. I do a lightweight backpacking class, so if you want to learn how to get down there, you have to take that one.
I thought the guideline was 10% of your body weight.
For being now, it's more probably 20% is like the guideline of what you should maximally carry. But backpackers often go, like when I was a kid, I started backpacking at age 11 and I probably didn't weigh more than 70 pounds at that age. And I was carrying probably 30 pounds just for an overnight camping trip. So yeah, it was kind of crazy. This is my fuel. I have a little alcohol stove in here. It's a homemade deal that I'll show you. So this is denatured alcohol you buy at the hardware store, and I can just basically carry as much as I know I'm going to need, and carry it in a plastic bottle, so it saves a lot of weight, not having to carry metal canisters and things like that. Out in the outside pocket, a very simple first aid kit, some Band-Aids, a couple 2x2 pads, adhesive tape, some drugs, ibuprofen, Imodium, Benadryl, and antacids are my friends on the trail. A little sewing kit in here and a little tiny roll of duct tape. So that's kind of my repair kit and everything. 50 feet of parachute cord for hanging my food, and a little bag to keep it in. It's much easier to throw a rock over a limb in a tree when the rock is inside this little stuff sack and not try to tie it to the end of the rope. And this rope is great. It's got a foil filament that goes through it, so when you shine your light out in the night, the rope glows. So it's really easy to find if you have to go, oh, I forgot to put my toothpaste in my bear hanging bag. Now I gotta go find the bag, and it's after dark. Topo map of the area. I get these off of mytopo.com. They have the full USGS database in there. So you basically pick the range, the region that you need. You can get it on different size sheets of paper, waterproof paper, waterproof ink. They print them out, ship them to you. So that's really cool. Stakes for my tarp. My spoon. And my toiletries. So yeah, my toiletry kit, toothpaste, toothbrush, the tiniest little thing of lip balm that my dentist gave me as a sample. And again, it's about lightweight. And a little thing of insect repellent.
I was told to cut the handle off our toothbrushes.
Yeah, you could, I'll tell you what, there are much better ways to start saving weight if you're just getting going. But when you get down to the point where you're shaving fractions of an ounce, yeah, people do stuff like that. I'll tell you what, don't cut it too short because it's really hard to try to do that when half your hand has to get it into your mouth to brush your teeth. I forgot to start with my clothing, but we'll get into that. Bandana on the outside of the pack. I carry 2 bandanas. One would just have gotten rinsed out and it's out on the outside of the pack. That same ultraviolet light that'll purify water is coming out of the sun. So you want to help sanitize your bandana, keep it out in the sun. Let that UV hit it. And then I have a second one that's in my pocket. So this is the one that's just been cleaned and staying fresh, and the other one's under use. Inside, this is pretty much what 10 pounds of food for a week. My food usually runs me about 9 to 10 pounds for 6 to 7 nights, and that's pretty much what it's going to look like in the stuff sack. So that's what gets hung in the tree. And then I didn't show you this, but I don't carry lots of stuff sacks. I have so little in here that up at the top I will have the sleeve of different garments. I kind of ruined it by taking the food bag out, but they're all accessible. So I can open up the top of my pack, and if I need my rain jacket, there's my rain jacket. Pull it out. If I want my wind shirt, my long sleeve shirt, there it is. When I get my long sleeve shirt, this is the first thing that I go for when it starts to cool off. That's usually towards evening. It's starting to cool off. I might be getting it before I go, to the little kitchen area, cook my meal. I keep my headlamp inside the pocket. So I always know where my headlamp is, and that's the second thing that I'm gonna need when it starts to get dark. So they live together in my pack. I grab one, I get the other automatically. So that's a little long sleeve shirt. This pair of wind pants, they are really lightweight. They are not 100% waterproof, but if I'm talking about just light thunderstorms, if it's warm out, I'm just gonna get wet. I'll just hike in the rain, or I'll put something like this on if it's a little bit cool. These dry so quickly that my body heat will dry this out even while it's just raining a little bit. They'll just kind of like get wet but dry. And they're my layer when it starts to cool off. Some, I can pretty much go for a whole trip and not put anything more on than a pair of shorts and these lightweight pants. Upper down jacket, and inside the pocket of my down jacket is my warm hat for nighttime. So again, if I'm going for my really warm stuff, they're together. One's inside the pocket of the other. I carry, like I said, I carry a pair of long underwear bottoms. I hardly ever use them. I have a second pair of socks tied in here, so I know where they are. That second pair of socks stays clean and dry the whole trip. They don't go on my feet on the trail. They're for like when I'm sleeping and I want something warm on my feet. I have one other pair of socks. They are the pair I wear every day for hiking. Rinse them out as much as I can, but you don't want to bring dirty, damp socks into your sleeping bag with you at night. That's why those guys stay nice and pristine. My tarp, basically it's a rectangular piece of silicone treated nylon. String it up like an A-frame or something like that. I kind of like the idea of like sleeping out. I actually, if there's no threat of rain, I don't even set the tarp up. I just sleep out under the stars. So the tarp is for rain protection. My cook set is basically a little titanium pot, kind of similar to the one I passed around. It serves as my cup. I created a little insulated koozie for it. I do some of my own freeze-dried kind of meals, like instant rice, ramen noodles, stuff like that. And so I can basically just pour water in here with my meal, put it in there, and then wait the 10 minutes that it takes for everything to hydrate. And I've got it nice and insulated so that water stays hot. Because I don't have foil pouches for my homemade stuff. Inside, there's a little windscreen, a lighter, a little like medicine measuring cup for measuring out my alcohol. So I know how much alcohol it takes to bring a cup of water or 2 cups of water to a boil. I just measure it out, light the stove. And the idea with this is that's the stove, okay? There's no on-off switch. Basically, it's gonna burn until it burns out. So I try to measure the fuel out into here to try to get the water to a boil and have very little fuel left, and then just let this thing burn out. It's made out of 2 soda cans. You can go on YouTube. There's all kinds of cool videos on YouTube about how to make your own alcohol stoves. So if you want to experiment, you can try that out. I carry a second cup. So like at dinner time, my food will be in here. Have a drink. I take like emergency stuff like that, electrolyte kinds of drinks. I'll have that out of here. In the morning, I eat granola out of here, and I have my grande Starbucks Vias out of the big guy, right? So I usually don't even mess with like hot, I don't do hot water for the granola, so I just heat water in here out of the Via packs. Keeps the coffee nice and warm. And then the last thing is my sleeping bag. Just all in one big sack together. Like no stuff sacks, no separating compartments. This goes in first, everything gets crammed down on top of it. So if you want to try to compress a sleeping bag, just shove a bunch of stuff into your pack on top of it. You know, people come in, they get like stuff sacks and compression sacks. I'm like, your bottom of your pack, if you have a bottom compartment on your pack and it has a separator, that's the compression sack. Don't put it in another sack and get it into a certain shape and then take that shape and try to fit it into the bottom of that pack. It doesn't really work out that well. So this is a good 15-degree down bag. Great bag. All of that, all of the things that I'm concerned about staying nice and dry are inside a heavy-duty trash compactor bag. Okay, it's like a 30-gallon trash compactor bag. I've actually used it multiple trips. You want something that's really durable. A standard trash bag, you stick something in there, you'll stick your finger right through the plastic on that because it's so thin. Trash compactors apply a lot of force to get something smashed down, so the bags are really heavy duty. Okay? So that's what's in my pack. What I have on during a typical day of hiking is a lightweight hat. So it's really for shade up here, and it's also a lightweight, really quick drying fabric. So if I'm perspiring, this does a great job of keeping the perspiration from running down in my face and helps really, wick it and dries really quickly. So that's good. There's my second bandana that I have in my pocket, or a lot of times I just tie it around my wrist so it's always ready. Like the bandana is like my first aid kit item, actually. If somebody ended up like cutting themselves with a knife or something and there's blood coming out, I'm gonna grab that bandana and boom, slap on the pressure. So I always have them really accessible and easy to use. Pair of, little smart wool running socks. That's what I'm backpacking, basically. A synthetic t-shirt. So something that if it gets wet, it's going to dry out pretty quickly. This one I got like from volunteering at a local charity run, right? So you don't have to spend a lot of money on some of this stuff. I wear a pair of shorts. These are basically like a water short. So the pockets have mesh. There's a mesh liner in here. So I don't wear underwear. I don't carry extra underwear. These things are like on my body from the time I hit the trail until the time I get off the trail. And then, with this and this, that's like my bottom layers. Swim in these, so yeah, they get fresh sometimes by swimming and stuff like that. But really quick drying. I had a situation one time, I caught this big trout, right? And I let him go, and he found his way into these rocks, and he was like nosed in to these rocks. I'm like, I don't think that guy can get himself out of there. And I like was really worried about it because I don't like unnecessarily killing animals, right? So I ended up stripping down completely to just my shorts, and I was in water like this deep trying to get this trout out of the water. And as I'm doing this, the storm comes rolling in. There's clouds, the rain starts coming down. And so, I put this on, I put the shirt on, I put my long sleeve shirt on, I put my pack on, and I kept on hiking, and I was dry in no time. So, key, really quick drying clothing is your lifesaver. And then my little gaiters. So these are like little trail running gaiters. They hook on your laces on the front of the shoe. They have a little Velcro thing, so you put a little sticky Velcro deal on the back of the shoe, and that holds them down, and they go around your ankles. And so when I'm on the trail, the rocks don't get in the tops of my shoes. I walk through water, and you stir up all kinds of sediment in the creeks and stuff, and it doesn't get into my shoes. Just something as simple and basic as that. So that's it. That's my pack. Like I mentioned, a camera, fishing gear probably, but that's really the camping essentials of what I'm carrying.
If you were carrying a tent, how would you strap it to your pack? How would you carry it?
Have I ever carried a tent in this pack? If it was small enough, I would stick it like vertically inside the tent in the pack if I could. Maybe I'd strap it to the outside, like on the opposite side of where the pad is. With this pack, I could possibly, there's a strap that goes over the top, so I could probably like put something horizontal on the top and strap it on. But I also have another pack, so yeah, I have a couple other packs. So if I were gonna go with lighter weight options, the other thing is, like, this pack has no structure to it, right? You know, you don't have a rigid frame sheet. It's really important to pack this pack in a way, like, I don't want to put my cook set, like, right against my back, or I'll feel it poking through.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna start adding the weight and getting into tents and things like that, then I pull out my other pack that has more structure for carrying more weight, basically. But yeah, this guy is nothing. This pack, like, weighs about 2 pounds itself, where that Baltoro is probably like 5.5. Yes.
You're saying you only have one pair of socks, so do they like dry overnight? Leave them outside when you dry?
Yeah, I have. I try to get them dried out. Like when I get to camp, I'll take them off, set them in the sun.
Yeah.
You know, try to get them dried out. I'll just wear my shoes without socks while I'm, you know, messing around camp or going fishing and stuff. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
One night I was in New Mexico in October in the Gila Wilderness, and I was on this middle fork of the Gila River. The river meanders back and forth through this canyon, and you're crossing the water. You're going through the water practically every 20 minutes. So the whole day my feet were wet. And I got to where I was going to camp, and we were kind of in the shadow of a hillside. And I tried to get my socks dry by the fire, and they didn't dry out. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I had to get up to answer the call of nature, and my shoes were frozen. It was like, it got down into the 20s. So I'm sitting in my sleeping bag, and I'm taking my shoes, and I'm just like working them to loosen them up so I could get my feet to go in. So it's one of the downsides of like wearing the same pair of shoes to go through the water.
Yeah.
Most people don't do that, right? Most people carry some kind of water shoe for water crossings. Keep your socks nice and dry, keep your shoes nice and dry. But, if you guys would drop your evals off for me, that'd be great. Thanks. So that's it about gear. Anybody have any questions about anything that you've seen? So a couple of classes coming up that you might want to take note of. This hands-on camp stoves and water filtration class has been really popular. Basically, they bring out a bunch of stoves, filters, purifiers, SteriPens, all that kind of stuff, and you get to actually use it and try it out and see how things work. So lighting liquid fuel stoves and canister stoves and all that. If you're thinking about going to Big Bend, we have a class called Preparing for Big Bend. You bring your gear, talk about gear, they do a little training hike, talk about logistics of water and things like that out in Big Bend. Series of best hill country hikes. We've been doing like 1 or 2 of those a month starting in the fall. So they become pretty popular. Thanks. Yeah, see ya. And one thing that's not on here, in the spring, we'll be doing some overnight backpacking trips, I think to Colorado Bend State Park. One in March, one in April, one in May. We provide gear. You have to bring your clothing and things like that, but we provide packs, sleeping pads, tents, whatever you might need. If you have your own, you can bring it. So keep an eye out for those to come up. If you don't know anything about reading maps or using a compass, pretty much once or twice a month we offer this navigation with map and compass. Great introductory class to like figuring out where you are and kind of associating what you see in a topo map to your local surroundings and everything.
Will you be leading that class?
I'm one of the instructors for that. You know Mary,
Yes.
probably taking classes with Mary. So Mary and I are the instructors for that class. Sometimes we do it together, sometimes we do it separately. Another great class to take if you're gonna get any distance away from urgent like 911 responders is Wilderness First Aid. We offer that through REI and an organization called the Wilderness Medicine Institute. They're up in Lander, Wyoming. They're part of NOLS, which is the National Outdoor Leadership School. The first one coming up is in February, but I think there are probably 3 of those on the calendar in the spring. They fill up pretty quickly. They're like $200 for the class, but it's 16 hours worth of first aid training. It's a great class to take. When you're talking about somebody in your group having some knowledge of first aid, that's a great way to get it. So I try to point out like a sampling of some of the stuff coming up like through beginning of February in some of the areas that I think backpackers would be interested in. REI also offers classes in cycling, bike maintenance, rock climbing, paddling. In the summertime, we have kayaking and stand-up paddling classes, all kinds of stuff. So you can always find out about those at rei.com/learn. And Texas Parks and Wildlife is a great resource for figuring out where can I go do a little overnight in a state park. There's all kinds of expert advice articles on rei.com. Those checklists I printed out, you can download yourself. All kinds of articles on how to choose a sleeping bag, how to choose a backpack, stuff like that. Wilderness.net is information on all the wilderness areas in the country. National Park Service is information on all the national parks. So if you want to start getting information to plan a trip in a national park, you can use those resources. mytopo.com is where I get my maps. LeaveNoTrace.org, if you want to study up on some of those Leave No Trace things, you can go there, find information on that. And there's also REI Adventures, so beyond what the Austin market is offering, you can go all around the world with REI. You can do like 3-night backpacking trips around the US, you can go all over Asia, South America, all over the place, with all different types of activities. So you can always check that out online. And that's about it. So, we talked about Leave No Trace. We talked a lot about gear. What conditions are you anticipating? Comfort is a big aspect of gear, right? I sleep on a really thin foam pad. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world. When it comes to backpacking, it's all a trade-off. Weight, risk, comfort. Everybody's solution to all of those constraints is unique. Do what you feel is right for you, okay? I can tell you how I do it. Most people are not going to do it the way I do it. But I've been doing it for a long time, so I like doing things differently and kind of pushing my limits. If you're just getting started, be comfortable with it, Start out short trips, carry the most comfortable stuff, and then if you get going longer, then maybe you want to start sharing some weight, stuff like that. Lots of resources to help you continue to learn about these kinds of things. Okay? And if you're not a member of REI, I can talk to you about that after class. Questions about anything? I told you I'd try to be done by 8:15. It's 8:21. I hope you guys feel like you'll learn something. I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate you coming out. I know everybody's busy, especially this time of year, getting ready for the holidays and stuff. But if you would leave evals for me on the table. Probably about 20 people were here. Yeah, and I'm going to be packing up all this stuff, so if you have questions, feel free to linger. And okay, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Can you put up the web pages again, please?
Sure. Yep.
So we're getting back at the sun on this, we're hoping to